In this special edition of the Pew Football Podcast, I speak to Ben Nicholas and David Tryhorn, who are the brains, the directors of the Figo Affair, the new Netflix documentary that has impressed me so much that I needed to talk to them, and I needed to find out what was the difficult parts of getting some of the huge names that they've got in the show. Obviously Figo talks to them, but Pep Guardiola as well, and Florentino Perez. How did they manage to do that? It's not easy at all. And what did they think it was the important parts of the story, and what they had to leave out? A lot of detail for those that like to go in depth on how a product like this, a show like this, gets put together. And well, Ben and David did not disappoint.
The project overall was 18 months in terms of our role, but probably 2 years in terms of the whole development and securing access to the relevant people. So yeah, once you finish a project like this, it's a huge part of your life that you're sort of devoting to one and in this case, very small topic. You know, ultimately, we're mainly talking about 3 weeks in the summer of 2000.
Now that you've dwelled into it and you've gone deep into the story, can you tell us, from your point of view, why that remains so clear in the mind of people?
I think everything we see now about modern football, you can almost put back to that moment in 2000. You know, that's ultimately, this is where the moment Florentino Perez arrives, builds his Madrid. You know, no Figo, no Galacticos, no Perez, no sort of the Real Madrid dominance of the last, certainly in Europe, of the last decade. It was the first kind of astronomical transfer in that sense. It completely redressed the balance in terms of the rivalry between Barcelona and Real Madrid. So I think, you know, it's a transfer that still resonates today. And I think, as you said, it's already creating, as we probably knew it would, it's already creating heated debate in Spain. And despite it being 22 years old, it still feels quite raw, I think.
In fact, Ben, what's quite clear is that there's still dividing people in Spain, and for anybody to actually put their eyes into it and the proper way of putting it together had to be somebody from, if you like, from the outside world of Spanish football, because right now the kind of reactions you get from Barcelona is like, it doesn't matter how many documentaries that get done, that Figo will always be a mercenary, a traitor, and whatever. I'm from Madrid. They just got this happy smile of something that really came up, left Barcelona behind. So, Ben, you had that in mind, no? That you had a couple steps away, and we could see the whole thing in a neutral view.
Yeah, I think that was something we were always really keen to do. Obviously to tell the story, to give the context, to give some of the history, but to always kind of, for us, to remain neutral, which was easy for us because we genuinely have no foot in either camp or any allegiances to either club or anything, despite we're huge football guys. But we're very aware that you're never going to please everyone in that sense. But in the film, we always wanted to say, never feel like you're saying, this guy's a liar, this guy's good, this guy's bad, these fans were right, these fans were wrong. We never try to kind of judge anyone in that sense. And hopefully the audience can make up their own mind, but as you say, everyone's going to have their own favourite person or their own personal slant on how the story should be taken. For
those that don't know the story, which I'm not sure there are many, but in short, it's a very loved player, Football Club Barcelona, captain as well, and who represented the values of Barcelona, goes to Madrid. What happens in the middle, how that transfer takes place, is what it gets explained in different ways by all the people involved. Did you go into the story with a clear mind of resolving what happened, or just putting across what everybody had to say, David?
I guess the first thing that we did was a real sort of deep dive into researching the story, and that was kind of going through all 4 sports papers on a daily basis for months and months and months in the lead up. And a lot of the backstory of sort of similar contract disputes between Figo and other players at Barcelona. And it was just getting a really clear timeline of events and finding every time someone had spoken about it. And I think we'd worked out some of the main protagonists had gone on record, but usually quite briefly. Figo's agent, Jose Vega, had never spoken on it, so that was a huge testimony kind of missing. And it was this feeling that kind of, and it comes up a lot in the documentary, everyone has their truth, everyone has their version of the truth. And I think it was quite clear as we began interviews that everyone had, I'm not going to say they were unreliable, but everyone had a very different account. And I think we then realized it would be a big mistake if we were suddenly going to try and make a documentary that was our version of the truth. Because otherwise, all it's going to be is just one more version. So, and from a filmmaking perspective, it's much more fun in a way to pit all these different accounts against each other and have the narrators almost contradicting each other on a constant basis. And so it leaves the viewer kind of guessing as to who's telling the truth, who isn't telling the truth. And I think it would be wrong of us to suddenly take a clear position to say, actually, this is what happened, because I don't think anyone quite knows exactly what happened. And I think even the guys, when there was even the main narrators, and there's 5 main people inside the deal, as we know, Florentino Perez, Juan Gaspar, Figo himself, his agent Jose Vega, and then Paulo Futre, who's kind of acts as an intermediary between Figo's camp and Perez. And I think, you know, even though they were contradicting each other, I think they were all very convinced that, well, this is my truth, and this is actually what happened.
The amount of voices or the quality of the voices that you bring is outstanding. And reading the credits at the end, I saw that you had interviewed other people, big names that are difficult to get, and did not use them.
Yeah. But I think at the beginning, I think we were. I think as I said, Dave and I are huge football fans, and we love all these kind of any kind of behind the scenes business of football. We love all that type of stuff. But I think as we got into telling the story, I think we realised that a lot of the time in these kind of books you read, articles you read, you have a slight feeling of being on the outside looking in on a story, and a slight kind of detachment. And I think that in some ways that can work really well in a book or in a long read or something. But in a film, that will kind of kill you if you're feeling you're a few steps removed from the actual story. So I think, as you say, the key thing for us really at the beginning was getting, I didn't actually think we would maybe get the big 5, but we had to get as many or as much time with those guys as possible for the film to feel kind of immediate or to feel cinematic, because I think you had to feel like you're in the room with the deal, you know, as it's happening day by day. What's happening is the ups, the downs, and if we've got someone who kind of heard from a friend of a friend what was happening, I think that's different. So we really kind of insisted that anyone who's in the film had to be able to say, I was there, or Figo called me, or I spoke to Florentino, I had lunch with Florentino. Those were the kind of, if you can't say that, you kind of ended up getting cut. So as you say, we had some huge names also interviewed, and it's something we drilled down to in the edit. Unless they could do that kind of thing, in the end, we decided the more time you could spend with the 5 guys who are doing the deal, who are actually kind of sweating it out to 4 a.m. in Lisbon on the last night, then that was almost the condition you had to be to make it into the film.
How did you put all these huge names together, which never been in the same program before?
Well, we always had. We knew at the beginning we had Figo on side, and he was actually he was key really in getting most of the big 5. He still has a relationship with Paulo Futre. He still has a relationship with Jose Vega. He's able to pick up the phone to Florentino, and we actually had contact with Gaspar quite early as well. So. I mean, Florentino was the one which I thought we would have to live without, really. But as the film picked up steam, as our relationship with Figo maybe began to trust us more, enjoyed working on the film, kind of got into the idea of having a film about the whole summer. Then that was something that we were working. Kind of the film was 80% done by the time we got in the room with Perez. But that was a fantastic kind of last quarter of the film to know that we had the big man.
I haven't heard Figo talking so openly about this. I haven't heard before Jose Vega talking. Florentino Perez doesn't give interviews. Pep Guardiola chooses very clearly the projects, and this must be one that really hurt him because, of course, Figo is the godfather of his son, and they were so close as you portray in the picture. So I'm just saying this as a standing ovation for the names that he got and the fact that they actually together tell that story. But the one that I wasn't aware of the relevance of is Paulo Futre, of course, an Atletico Madrid legend. And this is one of the things that has come out for people that weren't aware of the story, for Atletico Madrid fans. Like,
Yeah.
Futre, what have you done? By the way, he's just been discharged
Yes,
from
yeah.
hospital. He had a heart
Yeah.
attack just a few days back. He's back home today, but he's become an enemy to his
I
own
hope he doesn't get
now.
too much heat, because he's my favourite character in the film by far. I think both, and I think that's what we mean. There's an unscrupulousness to both Vega and Futre, but I think they're very charming with it. You can see the charm in both of them, and they were both very nice people to work with. But I think Futre is brilliant. He's I keep saying he's probably the best interview I've ever done, and I only asked him 3 questions, and he ended up speaking for about 3 hours.
And in fact, there is a moment, which again we're not going to disclose, a moment in which he does something that changes the course of history, of football history, if you like. I don't know if you were aware of it, of that moment, that turning point of it, or you found it as you spoke to him, and of course you made it a climax of the story. How did it come about?
I think we'd read. Oh, go on, Dave. Yeah, I think we'd kind of read. The funny thing was we'd kind of read his. He has a. Was it a book? Was it his book, or was it? I can't remember what it was now. It was his book. He has a kind of 20-page recollection of the whole summer. And the funny thing was we got this interview. He came one evening after we'd spent time with Luis. So kind of Luis called him, and he kind of came down. And Dave and I had thought it could be amazing if we can get half of this 20 pages he's written in his book for the film. And we'd written we spent the night before thinking he might come, so we'd done 2 pages of questions. I think Dave sat down and said the first question, tell us how that story unfolded, and he just went for kind of 2.5 hours. Dave was just he literally telling the whole story kind of word for word almost, and in his own manner. As Dave says, him and Vega are kind of the two other kind of guys you dream about as directors, I think, in terms of interviews. Just the storytelling is unreal, really.
I think one thing that we found really interesting and that we ran with was that when we started this film, as you say, we try and piece it together a little bit like a thriller. And we saw it as this kind of heist movie, and in the sense that here's Florentino Perez, he's trying to basically steal the shiny diamond that is Luis Figo at Barcelona, to cement his own power and to get one over on his rivals, essentially. And that's the heist. I think what we never were quite aware of was that there's another heist going on, and it's Futre and Vega who are going after the commission. And in a way, you can see, and I don't know, it's fair, that Figo's this kind of pawn in the middle of this story between these 2 power grabs going on. But I think that was the surprising element of the Futre Vega story that we weren't quite aware of as we set out, that there's this other kind of this other machinations to try and get Figo to go to Madrid.
It's an hour 44, 44, I think it is, yeah. And I would have watched another hour of it, so I imagine you left a lot of things out. You represent very well the reaction of the Barcelona fans, but I don't know if you're aware, Figo had a Japanese restaurant in the center of Barcelona was down. So I'm sure this is you both nodding. So that means this is one of the bits that you had to leave out. Anything else that you want to share with us that you had to leave out of the film?
The pig's head. There's no pig's head. I think, again, as Ben was saying, because we constantly wanted to be in the room and tell the story in a very present tense way, that you're not looking at, you're never looking back on things retrospectively. We're always kind of in the moment. And the pig's head was one we've been asked it so many times. Why isn't the pig's head there? And it's because no one actually noticed at the time. It was one of those things that there was the image came a few days later, I think. And actually, there's one tiny shot of it that's been filmed, and the pig's head's tiny, and you can barely notice it, and you'd have to put a little ring around it. And
it hits Roberto Carlos on the foot, I think, and bounces off him, and he doesn't even really notice it, I don't think. So it's one of those things that was a great image when zoomed in on for the papers, I think, and everything. But in terms of actual video footage of it, it was almost nondescript.
And what was your feeling meeting Florentino Perez, as we know, a very powerful person who doesn't give interviews? So, of course, it must have been Figo who convinced him to do so, and knowing that in you he was in good hands. But he shows the same calmness that he had in that crazy period where he knew he had it all sorted. And he comes into the interview, sounds also like like, I'm going to tell you what it's like because I know the truth because I'm the protagonist. It was that calmness and that composure that he's never left him since that time in the early century, David.
No, it was as Ben said, it was the last interview we got because we realised we probably only had one shot at Florentino, and we wanted to make sure we were sort of, as the months went by, it's like, okay, what is our approach? And we don't want to make the wrong approach. And I think after speaking to sort of journalists like Lou, who'd been helping us, and other Spanish journalists, they were like, your best shot is through Figo. And so we convinced Figo to sort of try for us, and we were never expecting it, but yeah, when Figo told us, yeah, Florentino's agreed, and then it was very businesslike. It's like, you're right, you've got this amount of time. It's got to be at Real Madrid. He only does it in the trophy room. We had to convince him because all the interviews are kind of a standardized backdrop because we wanted them all to have this quite neutral feel and this focus just on the interviewees. So we then had to convince that we could have our backdrop over blocking the view of all the European Cups in the Madrid trophy room. So yeah, it was quite a nerve-wracking one, but he turned up on time. He asked for questions in advance and answered every single question we gave him. So there was no kind of, blocking out, I'm not going to ask this, I'm not going to answer this. I'm sure there's an awful lot more he could tell us. But it was quite interesting. He didn't deny being with Paulo Futre. He didn't deny, as he said, the contract was signed between him and Jose Vega. And yeah, he spoke a little bit more. We could have used him earlier in the film, but I think we decided it was much more impactful sort of bringing him in about an hour into the film. I've given away a horrible spoiler there, but it's yeah. And then he was very charming, wasn't he? He was unbelievably charming.
Yeah, because we were told before. I think I can't remember who it was now. Someone at Madrid said to us, he's going to come in. You should address him as Mr. President, blah blah blah. But he came in very kind of on time, but very casually. Hi, I'm Florentino. Hi guys, blah blah blah. Handshakes, kisses. Gave us a lovely shirt but when we left. Yeah, he was pure style for us. I don't know whether he was turning it on or not, but yeah, he was lovely.
That's him behind the scenes, but the entourage makes him perhaps makes us feel that he's much bigger than he actually is, yes, or that he wants to be treated. He's got the tone of a winner, has always had that, and I think that's part of the attraction of Florentino. Out of what he says, I keep in my mind the idea that yes, there was a clause to be paid, but he suggests he wouldn't have charged them that. Yeah, right, okay. Not sure that would be the case, but as it all went well, all as he wanted, he, I guess, can say that kind of thing. But let's finish with Figo, because I sense a couple of moments of tension. He obviously had to go through absolutely everything. I don't know if that's portrayed by you and the way you caught the words, or if actually there was times where he wasn't that comfortable talking about things, David.
No, he was. So I did the interview with Luis. Now I don't speak Spanish. I speak Portuguese. So we were doing this strange thing where we were speaking off camera in English. Then I'd interview him in Portuguese, and he'd respond in Spanish. And the reason we wanted it in Spanish because we thought this is a very Spanish story, and he's our main protagonist, and we need him speaking in Spanish, and clearly he speaks very good Spanish, having lived in Spain for so long. And we did it was a couple of days worth of interviews. So there'd be bits where you'd be talking sort of very normally about sort of early career stuff, Sporting Lisbon. You'd drift into Inter Milan, and things would be quite sort of on this very sort of mutual level. And we were always sort of waiting. When are we going to go straight in? It was always kind of warming him up to go and talk about the transfer. And I think the first time we did it, you could see him getting, I don't think I was winding him up, but you could see him getting quite sort of angry about it. And, I think he suddenly spoke for about 15, 20 minutes without being interrupted about the transfer. He had stuff to get off his chest, I think, immediately. But then there were lots of bits that didn't really add up for me as well. So it's sort of, I'm still sort of thinking, well, why, if you didn't sign a contract, if you're so adamant about not signing the contract, then why did you have to go to Madrid? And I still am kind of shocked that no one had the foresight to realise just how huge the ramifications would be. And that's something sort of both him and Vega was sort of a bit like, no, we didn't really expect it to blow up as it did blow up.
It's funny though, because I think at times you do like I happened to watch the film again last night because I was just wanted to check a few things, but ended up getting drawn back into it. And I was sitting there with my wife, and the bit that she just really couldn't believe is when he gives the interview to Sport, the second interview to Sport, and that's to me that is telling us that he did know he kind of knew the ramifications. He's thinking, I'm going to separate myself from Vega now. I'm not going to answer the phone to those guys anymore. I'm in a really, really bad situation here, and I'm going to just go rogue, and I'm going to give this interview to Tony Fierros. So I think there are definitely times when he kind of does realize the situation, and other times he's a very interesting character because he's a real kind of alpha male, real kind of what I would call executive personality. Gives you the impression that he's just kind of gliding through life, being the best in the world at football, making loads of money, marrying the most beautiful woman. But I think what the film shows is that even that type of personality, when they get involved in a situation like this, things start to shake, things start to crack. What did you think about him, Guillem, from how what you knew of him before to how he came across in the film?
But you describe him very well. The man who never gets it wrong, the man who's in control of the room, the man that will tell you how it goes, alpha male. But going back to that moment, yes, I was looking at him trying to explain why he did that second interview with the Sport, in which he wears the Barcelona shirt. He basically saying this is categoric. I'm definitely staying for everything to be confirmed on the other way a few days later, and it makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no sense. Because Tony is a good friend of his. Tony has done things with him because Sport is a paper that has looked after him, because he knows when he's talking to Sports, he's talking to the fans. And the only way to explain it, and you deal with that as well, is the pressures of those days in which, in the middle of it, if you have to explain your own personal crisis at some point in your life, not everything you do makes sense. Not everything you do is the right thing to do. And that's exactly how you explain it. Yeah. But for him, alpha male, to actually say, I got it wrong, it's something that perhaps it gets a bit harder. But he himself admits, at that point, I thought I was going to stay. So thank you very much for the effort that you put in it. It's come out really, really well. That information about trillions of views, that comes from you, so I hope it's true. So true stories. No, it must be doing really well. I mean, the reaction in social media from the already reviews in English media and Spanish media means that everybody who is interested will watch it, no?
Well, thank you for listening and watching. This was the latest episode of the Pure Football Podcast. You know, you can get them in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can subscribe to it. The link is in the description. And just a reminder that every Friday, 12 p.m. UK time, you will have a new Coffee with Guillem in association with Premier Sports, where we'll talk about La Liga. Games, stories, new players, all that will be there, so don't miss it.